Covering the veteran artists from pop, rock, soul, country, folk, and blues, this is the VVN Music Podcast. Today's program is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial by going to audibletrial.com/VVN. Hi, and welcome to episode 13 of the VVN Music Podcast. I'm Roger Wink, and today we're talking with L.J. Reynolds, a longtime member of the great R&B group The Dramatics. The internet is a funny place. Stories get published, but on many occasions, additional information does not make it to the media sources to further flesh out a situation. That's what happened in April 2012 when we published a story based on a press release we had received that stated that longtime lead singer and manager of the Dramatics, L.J. Reynolds, had been let go from the group, and the estate of Ron Banks, essentially his widow Sandra, and member Willie Ford were now in charge. What didn't make its way to our offices was a legal filing made just weeks later by Reynolds that ruled he was allowed to have full use of the Dramatics name. And as happens with the internet, sometimes long ago published stories come up in current business affairs, which is why, a few weeks ago, Mr. Reynolds contacted us to have us clarify the current situation with the Dramatics name. I invited him to join us for a podcast and tell the story of not only the legal wranglings of the last 4 years, but also his story and the history of the Dramatics.
I'm doing great, man. I mean, through it all that I went through with Ron's wife and Willie Ford, it's been a ride, and everything was good and going great. Every now and then they'll spot or them will come up about this. It's kind of hard to get stuff off the internet, even when it ain't even true. And that was something that Sandy did. She went and did some stuff she shouldn't have done. And matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do something for her at the end of the day. I can't say too much about it right now, but as far as them relieving me from the management or putting me out the group, they can't do that because I have legal documents that says that I'm in the Dramatics. I've been in the Dramatics since 1972. Over 38 top 10 singles. And Ron and myself, basically, we haven't had a manager in maybe 30-something years. We used to be managed by Forrest Hamilton. We used to manage Isaac Hayes and what's them girls saying, that Get Down Boogie Oogie record?
Taste of Honey.
Yeah, Taste of Honey. And then he had the Dramatics. And so we learned years ago that it ain't good to have a manager. He cost us a lot of money. We got into some accounting trouble, which we had a trademark and a Dramatics Inc. company in 78, whereas we were all listed, Ron, myself, Lenny Mays, Larry Dempsey, and Willie Ford. And I was an officer in that, and they were getting ready to take my house from way back then because the accounting firm, we ended up owing them almost $500,000, and I didn't have $500,000 even in my bank account. I tried to figure out how can we owe them that kind of money, and we don't have the money. So I learned a long time ago that most artists, they can't manage themselves. That's why when Sandra Banks and they put that stuff out there that Sandra is taking over the business, did nobody call her because they knew that she didn't know the business. And basically, I got friends from 40 years, with Universal Attraction. I still go through Universal, and we never signed a contract. It's always been on a handshaking basis at Universal. Jack Barton, Jeff Allen, and Jeff Epstein, and all those guys. When Sandra Banks put that false statement out there, they called me personally and said, we'd never book Willie Ford. And we never, and they never did. I also work with other agencies like Associated Booking, Jody Winnicky, but I just left the East Coast I was at Westbury Music Fair and the Constitution Hall in D.C., and I did all of this just 2 weeks ago for Universal.
Was that with the Dramatics, or was that as a solo show?
The Dramatics, and they say the Dramatics featuring L.J. Reynolds because of that threat that Willie Ford put out there and Sandra Banks that Willie was up front. Up front doing what? He ain't nothing but a bass singer. How's he going to go up front? And we got records that go. I'm sitting here, I'm in my house looking at gold albums now that I've sung lead on, and you can't duplicate that with a bass singer.
When you came into the Dramatics, you came in right after they had recorded their first album, which had What You See Is What You Get and In the Rain in it, and so forth. How hard did you find it to take over lead from the voice that had been heard on those records?
I always knew that I had a special gift. And I knew that, as well as Ron knew when he heard me sing when I met him at the Apollo Theater, and they were singing without the lead singer, William Howard, and he asked me to sing something, because I was with a group called the Chocolate Syrup, which we had some regional hits in New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. We had a big record, 2 big records out, Let One Hurt Do.
Yeah, Let One Hurt You made the top 40 R&B, so I remember that. Yeah,
and so we toured those 3 markets, and I also did the Apollo Theater, 2 different groups. I did the Apollo with the Chocolate Syrup. Then it became L.J. Reynolds and the Chocolate Syrup. Then those guys were somewhat older than me by 5 or 6 years, and they got kind of jealous at that L.J. Reynolds, and, it just got a little too loud for me sometimes, so I quit. And then I used to go down to the Apollo Theater, and I met Ron Banks down there. And Ron said, "Hey, man, we heard a lot about you. We ain't got our lead singer. Can you really sing?" And I said, "I said, what you see is what you're getting now, baby." And Ron said, "Ooh." And a year later, because it took him that long, maybe not a year, he called me through Don Davis, because I was over there with Don Davis getting ready to do something with Don Davis. And it players that I never wanted to be in a group again. But Ron, they were a whole lot nicer than those other guys were. Not all of them in the Chocolate Syrup was mean to me. It was just 1 or 2 sometimes. And I wasn't but a kid then. I was only 17 years old. And these guys were in their 20s. But I never thought that for one instance that I couldn't come in and change the face of this group, because God bless him, William Howard, he was a talented singer. But to me, he was no L.J. Reynolds.
I'd like to jump back just a little bit, because I want to get the whole story leading up to what happened in 2012, but I want to go back to the beginning. And you started recording, and you must have been in your early teens. You started recording back in the early 60s as Larry Chubby Reynolds.
Yeah, I was only 11 years old then. I did a song called Sweet Tooth.
And I've seen you now. It doesn't seem like a very appropriate name.
Larry Reynolds?
No, Chubby Reynolds.
Oh, yeah, I was a chubby little kid, and this lady that named me L.J. Reynolds, her name is Janie Mack. You see where I got that J from? So I started out, at tap dancing really at the age of 5. And I was tap dancing with about 30 girls. My 2 sisters were involved. I even got the photo that I'm putting on the back of my book. But I tap danced, and then we teamed up with the Ziggy Johnson tour. That's what it was. And we used to go out, and we would go to Ottawa, where all these black kids from the projects, that's where I was from, would sing to all the white people that would come and see these talented black kids. And Sammy Davis used to be at this place and stuff like that, places he couldn't go at first. He would be there. And so people started throwing money on stage when me and my sister started singing. So I quickly got out of the tap dancing business and got into the singing business, and started recording at that age of 10 and 11 years old. And I ended up on mainstream records because this lady, Janie Mack, used to bring me back and forth to New York as a kid. And I ended up on a record company called Mainstream. I don't know if you're familiar with Mainstream, but Janis Joplin was on that label. And I don't know if it was true, but somebody, a little birdie around that company or somewhere, somebody said, listen, Janis Joplin heard about you, little fella, and she's going to let you sing with her on her record. So I don't know if I dreamt that or it's been so long ago, but that was one of the things that I talk about. But Janis Joplin died, so I didn't get to sing the record with her. But I cut several songs on mainstream records. I don't know how many. And then I was also on the Washington label out of Saginaw. And after that, going back and forth with the Larry Reynolds and the Larry Chubby Reynolds, Janie Mack, when I turned maybe 15 or 16, she said, you know what? Larry Reynolds, that's not a famous name. She said, that's not going to sound right. She said, I'm going to call you L.J. Reynolds. And the J comes from Janie. And as a kid, I used to say, where'd she come up with that from? And after I thought about it, as I got older, I said, well, yeah, she got the J from her own, name. So at some point, I started going back and forth to New York because she used to take me back and forth to New York every year when I got out of school as a kid. Then she got me hooked up with a guy named Clarence Lawton, the Lawton label. And Bobby Martin, who was an excellent arranger, he used to arrange all of Wilson Pickett songs, and he did this group Jeffrey Osborne was with. Back in Love Again, they did that record.
Oh, LTD?
LTD, and Bobby Martin, he's been knowing me since I was like 17 years old. He the one produced Let One Hurt Do and did the horns and arrangements and stuff, and What's the Matter, Baby, Is It Hurting You, and All I Need, I did over there with him. But Bobby Martin showed me a group when I was 17. He said, look at this group. He said, they can sing. He said, but they just can't get a hit record. You know who that was?
Who?
The OJs. Yeah, so quite naturally, we see what happened with that later on. But Bobby kind of got out of the business. And I found out, too, that Wilson Pickett was my cousin because I went to a family reunion, and they had achievements from the family members. And I saw my picture up there as a singer star, and I saw Wilson Pickett. I said, why is Wilson Pickett's picture up there? They said Wilson Pickett and Mr. Pickett back in the slave days, Mr. Pickett and our family, the Jonts, some kind of way, the slave owner kind of merged. And so we were distant kids. And I remember seeing Wilson Pickett when I first started doing the Apollo with the chocolate syrup. And they used to say Wilson Pickett is a wild man. And I saw it firsthand how wild he can be because right after his show, Wilson Pickett had an 11 red outfit. I'll never forget it. And as soon as the curtain closed, because I was backstage, and they had an MC named Sad Sam. And Wilson went up to the drummer and lifted those drums up and threw them on top of the drummer, and they jumped up and went to fighting. And they fought all the way out till they came outside the curtains, fighting outside the curtain. I mean, it was something you see on
soap opera.
a movie or something. And that's one thing that I found out about Wilson, and I got to know the Isley brothers because they lived in Teaneck, New Jersey, and that's where Bobby Martin lived, in Teaneck. And so, and the Isleys had a record company called Teaneck Records. So I've been running them for quite some time.
So through the 60s, from when you started in the early 60s until 1970 when you joined the Relations, you were continuously recording and trying to further your career throughout that, even while you were in school?
Yeah. Well, I had a troubled school year. My schooling, I almost blew it. But I was able to, I had teachers and a principal. I remember the guy, he was a little short white guy. And at this all-black poor school for people in the projects and whatnot. I was doing bad on my grades, excellent in math. So my English was bad, for spelling and stuff like that. And he and some other teachers got together and they kind of tutored me and mentored me. And one time I told him I wasn't coming back if I was put back because I wanted to go pursue my career, and he made it possible for me to go and double up on summer school and basically to get a diploma. And I look back at those days and those years. If I could have done things differently, I probably would have. But I might not be the person that I am today if I had her. So I will say that the education is definitely necessary, because once I started making money and doing business, I had to go back and reteach myself reading and stuff like that. Math is a natural thing to me, so I can count $1 million and break it down how many ways ever you want me to. That was something that I had to deal with.
So after you joined the Relations, you had a couple, you'd made a few records there, and then you went to Chocolate Syrup, and you had your first big hit. And then you moved to the Dramatics, and with the Dramatics, you had an even bigger hit with Hey You, Get Off My Mountain, and that must have been a real experience for you after all these years of finally reaching that pinnacle.
Well, Get Off My Mountain, that was still Ouija. Yeah, that was still William Howard, because that was on the Devil Is Dope album. But the big record, my first big record was Fell For You. Uh-oh, girl, I think that I have fell for you, which was huge. Mountain was huge, too. Fell For You, I think, was even a bigger single than Get Off My Mountain. Or they were just as big, both of them. That was 2 songs off of that album, because Get Off My Mountain came out before I got in the group. What we did was we talked about me coming in the group, and then Get Off My Mountain was already out there. And so they brought me in to complete the album. So they took William Howard off the other songs, which was Fell For You, which was a top 10, maybe top 10 record. I used to hear high school students playing it on football games and stuff like that. So we knew it was a big record. It's a record that we still do today. And we also do Get Off My Mountain. But after Get Off My Mountain, we did other hit records like Panic and Cry, Door to Your Heart, Me and Mrs. Jones, Be My Girl, Stars in Your Eyes, Oceans of Thoughts and Dreams, Stop Your Weeping. I mean, I got gold albums up for these records right now.
That explains, too. I mean, I knew that you were credited on that album, so I had assumed that you had also sung on Get Off My Mountain, and that explains more that you came in the middle, so now I understand.
Yeah, but I've been singing that song for so long until when people hear that song, they think of my face, for William Howard. And he passed away, and me and him became good friends.
Did he leave on his own accord? Did he wanted to try a solo career, or?
Well, yeah, he wanted to do a solo career, and to me, his biggest fan was David Ruffin, but he was never a David Ruffin. Ouija had a voice that, hey, yeah, it was kind of just, and David was, I know you want to leave me, but I refuse. He can riff, as we call it. And Ouija couldn't do that. He didn't have a flexible voice. It was just good for yelling and acting. He knew how to act that stuff out. That, I can tell you, I respected him for that, being able to act. And I might even say I learned a little something about being in the dramatics, because at the end of the day, our motto was that when we're in the studio, we act the words out as you sing them. And songs like Me, Myself, and I that I did, and a lot of the other records that we've done, that we do on our stage shows now, Panicked and Cried, and Door to Your Heart. We did an album with the Dales called Dales versus the Dramatics. And apparently we won that contest because we had a million song off of that called Door to Your Heart.
I believe it was around the late 70s. You already mentioned the song Stop Your Weeping, and I believe that was the first of the Dramatics hits that you had written. Had you also written other music for the group up until that time?
Yeah, I wrote a few things that didn't quite reach that status. And I also arranged and produced and played the bass on that record. But I wrote songs like Never Let You Go, Be With the One That You Love, that Lenny Mays, I had Lenny Mays to lead, Hooked on You. I did a song called People I'm Willing to Bet. You thought you saw everything, but you haven't seen nothing yet. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And I wrote, I want you, baby, I want you, and I hope you want me too. A lot of the records that came in the 80s, we used to do those songs, and you turn me on just to turn me off. So I did. I wrote a lot of songs and produced, but me and Mrs. Jones was a big one too for us. We did a million on that, and that was produced by, well, we say it was produced by Ron and myself, but Ron was in the hospital when I was producing that record, and he had some surgery, so I did all the horns and strings arrangements on that, which show up the credits on there. Never Let You Go, I wrote that, produced it for the Dramatics. Things Are Changing, stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I've been at it for quite some time, that I wrote and produced a big solo record, which we'll get to that in a minute.
We'll return to our interview with L.J. Reynolds in just a moment, but first, there's a simple and convenient way to listen to the latest books, both fiction and nonfiction, in the comfort of your home, car, or workplace. Audible.com has over 180,000 titles from which to choose, from bestsellers to classics of literature, including hundreds of music-related titles. Among those books is Your Song Changed My Life by Bob Boilen, the creator of NPR's All Songs Considered and Tiny Desk Concerts. Boilen has written an essential oral history of modern music, told in the voices of iconic and up-and-coming musicians including Dave Grohl, Jimmy Page, Michael Stipe, Carrie Brownstein, Smokey Robinson, and Jeff Tweedy. Plus, now you can listen to Your Song Changed My Life for free with a 30-day complimentary membership to Audible, courtesy of VVN Music. Just go to audibletrial.com/VVN and choose Boylan's book or one of the thousands of others. That's audibletrial.com/VVN. I know that in 1980, you went off to start a solo career, and you worked at that over the next, I think, 5 or 6 years, and you had 6 records, of which you wrote a couple of them.
Yeah, that Key to the World is a huge record today. That's one of the biggest records on our show. For some reason, I did that record when I was 28 years old. I'm 64 years old now. That is one of the biggest records on the Dramatic show that we do, Key to the World. If I had the Key to the World. Matter of fact, it's so big until I just re-recorded it again. I haven't released it. It's going to be coming out soon. But I did to it what I did to Come Get to This, the Marvin Gaye remake that I got out now, that took my money $10,000 more. So Key to the World was one of them. Then Tell Me You Will was another one. Call Me that I redid by Aretha Franklin. Silly that I did by Denise Williams. She wrote that. And then I did some gospel stuff. Tomorrow was one of the gospel songs I did that was originally done by the Winings. Then I did 2 gospel CDs, and one of them featured a song with me and Gladys Knight called
I remember hearing it. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah. And I did the second gospel album was I wrote and produced most of it. It's a song called Sunday Morning, and I Believe You Can Make It. It wasn't written by me, but it was produced by me. It's a great record, and a lot of the gospel stations play that stuff today. So I do gospel shows too. So,
has religion always played a part in your life and in your music?
Well, my grandmother was definitely a Baptist. So I grew up with the teaching of God, but I also grew up with the teaching of Islam, believe it or not. My mother was a Muslim. She died a Muslim. She was buried as a Muslim. I learned a lot about the Holy Quran and the early Muslims and the teaching of Islam. And I was never taught at our church to be violent.
Well, I think that's a misconception.
Yeah, so when I see what's going on today, I mean, they've taken the Muslim faith and religion to another level. So, but I'm a Christian.
That's a small group that's done that. It's kind of like when people say that Muslims live by wanting to spread their religion all over the world in a violent way. It's like, well, you take that group and compare it to all Muslims, then you'd also have to say the Westboro Baptist Church represents all Christians, and that's not the case.
Plus, there's about 14 billion Muslims.
Right.
And so you're going to find some bad apples in a barrel that big. But for the most, Muslims are great people. I know a lot of Muslims. I got a lot of family members, some that's still Muslims today, and I don't hate anybody. So that's where I'm at with that. And so I was trying to think of that record I did with Gladys Knight. Jesus is my kind of people. That's it. Jesus is my kind of people. And this guy named Tony Camilio. Now, what kind of name is that? Tony Camilio? Is that?
It would be Italian, I think.
Yeah, Tony's a good friend of mine. I hadn't talked to him in a while, but I was recording the album with Tony Camilio, and Tony said, "How would you like to sing a song with Gladys Knight on a gospel record?"
Who wouldn't?
And he was doing a couple of gospel songs. I said, "Well, what you got?" So she had already sang all the way through it. And he said, "Why don't you go through?" Because he knew I was a writer and producer and stuff like that, too. So he said, "Find out where you should sing and where she should sing." So I went through it and picked out spots where I can get in to make it better, and did try not to, take any great things that she did, and I thought I did a great job on it, and people like it today. So that's off the first CD, gospel CD that I did, and then the second was called The Message, which to me that's my most favorite one, the one that I spoke on earlier about a song called Sunday Morning. And I believe you can make it. I mean, when I had surgery, I had a hip replacement, and I just felt bad. And I thought about that record. And I tell you, if you get a chance, go on YouTube and pull up L.J. Reynolds, I Believe You Can Make It. I did a video on that, too. I got 5 videos out now that's 2 gospel and 3, along with all the other dramatic videos on YouTube. I mean, we're all over the place with that stuff. People always tell me, "Man, I saw you on this show," and we did a lot of television. We did Soul Train probably more than any artist ever, because every time we came out with a record, Don Cornelius had us on that show because we were doing 400,000 albums out the box.
You may see some of those Soul Train appearances coming up again because BET just bought the whole Soul Train library and the name. I think it was on Monday of this week.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
So, they will probably start running a few of those.
Well, every album that we ever put out, with Stop Your Weeping and Be My Girl and all these are million sellers, Me and Mrs. Jones and Go to Your Heart and Can't Get Over You and Stars in Your Eyes and What You See Is What You Get in the Rain and Get Off My Mountain and Panicked and Cry. I mean, we got endless records. That's why after all these years, Dramatic's still able to go out and perform. Now, as Ron Banks passed away, Lenny Mays passed away, Larry Dimps was coming back to the group when Willie and Sandra put that stuff out about I'm Out and Willie In, which is totally ludicrous and totally impossible. Ain't no way that this man could sing those hit records.
Well, I want to jump back just a little bit, though, before that. You came back to the Dramatics in 1985 when I think they had been broken up for a little bit. Did you take over managing right at that time? Is that when that transition occurred?
No, it was a guy by the name of Ben Crosby, who was the East Side gangster. I was still doing my solo, but I went to do a prison in California called the St. Louis Obispo Prison. And they loved that record, Key to the World, if I had the key to the world. And so they paid me a decent piece of money to do that. It was some of us like, I don't know, whether it's $15,000 or more money than I ever made off one show. Something like that. So I decided to call Ron and bring Ron and Ouija and Lenny and Willie. And I brought them to California and surprised all of the inmates with some of the Dramatics. And so when we did that, and I was in the studio because I was at in Oakland. I was at Phil Jones was over there. Phil Jones, you familiar with Phil Jones? Fantasy Records. I was over at Fantasy, and they loved me over there. Phil Jones and I think his name was the attorney up there. They were doing movies and stuff. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and
Saul Zaentz.
Yeah, so those guys. And so I was friends with all of them. I got pictures of them here at my house with us together. And Phil Jones was in charge of the music department. And so I went to Phil and said, Phil, how about it if we do a dramatic reunion album? And me and this guy, Fred Pittman, who just passed away, we went in the studio and we put together the album and we recorded the album with all the guys on it. And the album came out good, and we released the album. It wasn't a big hit, but we went on Soul Train again after being off Soul Train for 8 years. By that time, we was in our 30s. And the reception for it was so great that we said, let's do a show. And we did a show, I think it was here in Detroit, and everybody came. I mean, you just couldn't get in. And we said, wow, why don't we just do a couple of more shows? And a couple of more shows. Then we went to Japan, then we went to England, and then we just kept going, and then William Howard, he left. And we decided to stay together and continue to work. And like I said, we learned about managers, and Mr. Crosby had wore out his welcome, as you might say. And Ron and myself fired. And we were in our 20s, in our 30s. We could have been 32, 3, or something like that. But his management didn't last long. And from then on, Ron and myself took care of the business. My job was to basically make sure the band was right, because I'm musically inclined and I play bass, drums, guitar, keyboard, arranger, producer, writer. I do it all. Plus, I'm a great manager. I mean, I managed to fight through this stuff that Willie and them did and put out there that I was kicked out and all of that. I mean, I took them to court. But the internet is dangerous. The internet, it can take things that ain't really true, and it can ruin people's lives.
I'm trying to remember. Of course, this was 4 years ago when that story first came out, and I believe that I received a press release, and that's where that original story came from.
Yeah, they put out a press release on that, trying to overtop me from running the business. But everybody in this industry knew that these two people had no knowledge of the business at all. Willie Ford has never taken a pair of pants to the cleaners for the group, let alone know how to manage the group. He ain't never paid no taxes. You got to pay taxes when you... It was crazy.
There was Ron Banks died in 2010, and it wasn't until April of 2012 when all this came about. Was there definitely tension and a changing of the dynamics in the group over that 2-year period?
Tension in the group? No, it wasn't no tension in the group. Willie Ford was fine until Sandra Banks did a very bad thing. She did a very bad thing to obtain something that she shouldn't have had.
So this came as a surprise for you then?
Yeah, it did. Because I always told her that she was never alone. I said, listen, don't worry, I got your back. I mean, those kids, I still love them today. But I told her to work with me, which she decided to try to take the name for herself, which I wasn't going to never let happen.
And she didn't do anything really legally about it. She just went and released that press release, and that's where you got the, I believe it was called the standstill order, in fairly short accord. You did that fairly quickly.
Well, yeah, I did. She did some things to make it look legal, which I ain't going to mention. All I know is it didn't work, because I went straight to court, straight to my attorney, and the judge saw through all of that and did a standstill order against him. Told him, don't do nothing against this man, and don't do nothing you ain't never done before. So that's why you don't see that you can't use the name out there anymore. So
are you the only one that can use the name, or is it a case that it's not owned by either party?
She can't use the name. She's never sung anything, so she can't use that name. Ron's estate owns a portion of that name, a portion. Larry Demps, who was going back out on the road with me, but he was coming back to the group because of Willie, and Willie went to try to start up another group, which don't nobody want to see.
Is he still touring under, is he just touring as Willie Ford now, or is he touring under another name?
He's not touring at all. Not that I know of. I mean, he started a group of guys. From what I heard, they were singing at a barbecue restaurant somewhere one time. And I know that they were calling up the Soul Train crews trying to get on that, and the people said no. They said, where's L.J. Reynolds? How you going to have the Dramatics without L.J. Reynolds?
And you have done that cruise, you said, I believe.
I just did it. Maybe about 3 months ago.
It's been 4 years now since all of the legal wrangling occurred. Have they made any other moves in that time, or is this standstill order pretty much the definitive ruling on all of this?
The standstill order is still in place today. I am currently talking with Sandra Banks because she's had a hard time. You know, she's had a hard time for what she did, and it got her nowhere.
Well, we'll look forward to an announcement about something on that, since you mentioned that it was something you couldn't really get into at this time. But
yeah, but you can be assured of that I can use that name. I'm using it today. I'm on the phone all day long booking concerts.
Well, I wish I had known more about this whole situation earlier and could have publicized it for you. But it's you know, while a press release goes out, a lot of times legal rulings don't always make it through to the people who need to know.
Right. That's why I'm not upset with you because of what you released. You were only doing, but we hadn't had that to happen in a while. Most of the industry knows what's going on, and they know that's a fabrication of L.J. Reynolds out and Willie up front. Up front doing what?
Do you expect anything in the near future as far as any kind of recording with the Dramatics or on your own?
Well, I do have a record on my record company. If you go to MotorCityHits.com, and that's my record company, Motor City Hits. And I got a big record out now off of that label called Come Get to This, a remake of Marvin Gaye. I want you to go to YouTube and put in L.J. Reynolds, Come Get to This, and look at that video that's up to about 300,000 views. And there's two other videos, You Sure Love the Ball and Cheating on Me. These are things that I did on my solo side that hit for me. And Come Get to This, Stepping Out the Night, that I did, reached number 24 on the Urban Contemporary radio charts. But if you go to MotorCityHits.com, there's a compilation CD that I put together. We even got that record on it. It's got the Four Tops on there. Levi's on there singing. Before he died, he was in a wheelchair singing a song called Motor City Hits Hall of Fame that I wrote and produced. Because Levi loved that record so much until he came in a wheelchair to perform it. And you got the Miracles on there before man, I got so much in my head. Before he passed away. And you got Keith Washington on there, Carla Cook, Sam Cooke's daughter. And you got a record called Bad Girl by the Dramatics. That's on there, Ron Banks' last performance before he died.
Is that the Miracles song, or is it a different Bad Girl?
No, it's a different Bad Girl. You've been a bad girl, and it makes me feel so good. That's a record that I wrote, I think. I wrote so many. I think it was me and Winsell Kelly, who's still in the group with me today. Winsell Kelly's been with us for 30 years.
Hey, I have to ask you a question, and this seemed, I was surprised when I read this. I was not aware of it. Back in 1992, you did work with Snoop Dogg when he was first coming out. And of course, Snoop Dogg is a great entertainer, and he's kind of mainstream now. But at that time, he was kind of a controversial figure. How did that come about?
Well, our bass player, Tony Green, I'd met him when he was 16 years old. He played with us about 10, 12, 13 years, touring with us. He moved to California. And we were on tour at the time, and we were singing at a place called, we were in Los Angeles. And it was called, I can't think of it, because Charlie Wilson used to hang around in the backstage of this place. But to make a long story short, till I think of it, I was at the hotel, and Tony Green called me and said, "Hey man, how would you like to?" Because he had hooked up with Dr. Dre and all these guys before they became really wealthy, and he was playing and cutting the records with Death Row, and I've been hearing bad things about that company. You know, gangster rapping and shootings and God knows what else they was doing. And then when I listened to some of the songs, it was MF this and bitch that, and you know, I got a phone call from Tony, and Tony said, "Hey LJ, how would you like to sing on Snoop Dogg's album? You know, with Suge Knight and them, it's got it coming out with a label called Death Row." I said, "Man, I don't want nothing to do with that company." I said, "I don't want nothing to do with it. They shooting and killing people and whatnot, that and the other." So I hung up. 15, 20 minutes later, Tony Green called me back again. "Hey, man, this is me, Tony. Just hold on for a minute. I want you to speak to somebody." I said, "Okay." I say, "Hello." Somebody say, "Hello." I say, "Hello." She said, "Mr. Reynolds, I didn't kill nobody. I didn't hurt nobody." I said, "Who is this?" He said, "This is Snoop Dogg." Snoop Dogg. He said, "I didn't hurt anybody. I don't hurt people and do nothing." He wasn't but 20 years old. He said, "I want y'all to sing on my album. I'm a big fan. My mother's a big fan." He said, "I already got 1 million orders for the album already, and it ain't even finished." I said, 1 million orders? I said, "What's the address?" So we went to the studio. The record playing, do, 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 do. It's like everywhere I look and everywhere I go, seeing trying to steal my flow, but it ain't no thing. I said, "Wow, what is all this cussing?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "Ron, I don't know if we should sing on this record, man." So we started listening. We started getting into the groove. And so me and Ron started making up, "Ooh, it's a doggy dog world, the dog's world. Ooh." So an hour went by. We was ready with it. We said, "We ready, Snoop." Okay, so an hour went by. Okay, Dr. Dre there drinking gin and juice like he said on the album. Next thing I know, 2 hours and went by. We still ain't got on the record. I said, "Snoop, you got to tell Dre, man, that we got to get on this record because we got a concert to do." Total Experience. That's where we was at. That's the name of the club, Total Experience. Big club that a lot of black people came to back in the 80s. And we were selling out lines around the corner. But Dr. Dre still bobbing his head, and 3 hours went by. I said, "All right, Snoop, that's all, man. We got to go. We go." And Snoop said, "See, Dre, they leaving. They leaving. Dre, don't let them leave." Dre said, "Okay, all right, y'all come on." We went in there and sung on that record. That record sold 8 million singles. They call us the Fabulous Dramatics. You know what? We got over 2 million young white fans. Because young people was into those records, and we didn't know it. And we picked up another audience. Not only whites, black, Hispanics, young people, and they called us the Fabulous Dramatics. That's why when they would say, because that was the guy, how he introduces us on that video. You ever seen that video?
No, I haven't. I'll have to look it up.
Go to that video and put in Snoop Dogg with the Fabulous Dramatics and Dog Pound. And that video took us 24 hours to do. And I think it might have cost about $350,000. And everybody you could think of is in that video. From Rerun to Pam Grier to Ron O'Neal that did Superfly. And that album sold 16 million copies. And the single sold 8 million records at one time. That's the biggest record we ever been on. All our records have sold millions and millions of records now. But at one time, so it prompted us to do another album with Snoop Dogg. And Snoop Dogg like Falling. That song that I told you was my first big record that was on the Devil's Dope album. Like a wheel whirling round and round. Ba, 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 da, da, da. It was on the same album as Get Off My Mountain, but it was just as big, if not bigger than that. Well, Snoop loved that record, so we went back on another album he did called Pay the Cost to Be the Boss, and we did that record. He called it Ballin'. Ballin', 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 ballin'. So that record didn't do quite as much as the first album, but it did pretty fair. And that's the Snoop Dogg story.
That's amazing. Well, listen, LJ, we've actually gone on quite a bit longer than I originally had said that we would, but this has just been a really fascinating conversation, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your story and also bring us up to date and explain the whole situation with the legal stuff.
Well, let the people know that, hey, the Dramatics and L.J. Reynolds are still out here going strong, so feel free to contact L.J. Reynolds through my Facebook pages, the Dramatics, and the Dramatics featuring L.J. Reynolds, and that's the way to go.
Our thanks to L.J. Reynolds for talking with us. We'll be back soon with another edition of the VVN Music Podcast. Remember that you can get the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues at vvnmusic.com, where you can also find back editions of our podcast with guests like Nils Lofgren, Steve Hackett, John Anderson, Marky Ramone, and Lloyd Price. Plus, don't miss the brand new VVN Music Radio, now available with dedicated apps for iOS, Android, and BlackBerry devices. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. Our theme music is performed by Yahar. This program was recorded on April 19th, 2016, and is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2016.